Hello, and welcome to the Say Yes to Holiness podcast. I'm Christina Simmons, your host, and today I have the opportunity to have a beautiful conversation. I know it's going to be wonderful. I'm so excited to have Amy Thomas here with me. So, Amy, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes, thank you. I love doing podcast interviews.
Well, I'm glad that you love doing podcast interviews because I love doing them as well as a host. And so I was so excited when you were willing to come on the show and to talk about the work that you do. And you too are a fellow podcaster. But before we get into that, why don't you go ahead and share with the audience a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got to where you are today?
All right. Well, I am a Air Force wife. My husband has been in the Air Force almost 20 years. I have 3 kids, a 20-year-old who is in college, a 16-year-old who is learning to drive and is what gives me heart attacks. And then I have a 7-year-old son who is my Star Wars mega fan. So yeah.
Oh, he must be loving all the Disney Plus stuff.
Oh my gosh. It's so sad because his mother is not a Star Wars fan, and he was born on Star Wars Day, May the 4th.
May 4th, yeah.
And so he's all about it, and I try to be. So anyway, but yeah. So I currently live in the DC area. We just moved over from overseas. We were in Turkey for a year, which was amazing. And yeah, so I've been traveling the country for 20 years.
Yeah, I can identify having been in the military myself for 14 years, my husband spending 28, and our middle son, Mike, he just retired from the U.S. Army after having spent 22 years, and they're in the DC area as well. He just got a job, and they're transitioning, and they just had their first child. We hope it's the first, so grandson. They are there in the DC area as well, so it's so many connections. We're so close in so many ways, and so often we don't realize it. But what caused you to go ahead and get involved in podcasting? Everyone has a different journey to that.
Well, I guess we have to back up just a tad because I'm kind of a fairly new podcaster. I am a convert to the faith. So I became Catholic in 2009. And then I were married. I was Protestant. He was Catholic. And that was probably the number one thing that we fought about. As I like to say, I fought with him about because I'm kind of a hothead sometimes. And I had grown up believing a lot of misconceptions about the Catholic Church. Basically, I thought it was an evil cult, even though my best friend was Catholic and I had been to mass with her and I knew that wasn't true. I compartmentalized it, I guess. And then I fell in love with a Catholic. And, your faith doesn't mean as much to you until you have children. I mean, it does, right? But once kids come along, it changes everything. And so our daughter changed everything. And now it really mattered. Are we going to be Protestant? Or are we going to be Catholic? And so that was one of the things that we fought about. And my husband is an engineer, and he's very logical and intellectual and analytical. And he just laid out every argument, and it just blew me away how wrong I was. And so I had to go start learning about it for myself because I was very humiliated because I was so wrong. And, we don't like to be wrong. But I could not argue with him. And so I realized that everything I believed about the Catholic Church was just I just picked up osmosis. Like, I didn't know why I believed in that. I just did, because I grew up mostly in a Protestant, community. And so I started researching church history and where we got the Bible, and that just floored me.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it was the Eucharist that really grabbed me. And so I knew I had to convert, and that was in 2009. Well, in 2009, one of my dear friends from college who had been a Christian became an atheist. And, I was newly Catholic, and, it's kind of cliched to say, but it's like when you convert, it's like this treasure box is open to you, and
Mhm,
you want to learn all the things and do all
mhm,
the practices. And you're like, I've been denied all this for my life. And she started really attacking Christianity, specifically Catholicism, on social media and
mhm,
me. And I did not have the answers for her. I knew there were answers, but I didn't have them. And
mhm,
so I was trying to argue with her, but it was not going well because I wasn't learned enough myself. And so I
mhm,
said, you know what, I'm going to take a step back and I'm just going to spend some time, you know, learning about the faith
mhm,
so that I can understand this. And so I did. And at that time, I started blogging when blogging was cool.
mhm,
And just expressing my thoughts. And gosh, I probably read ugh, maybe 75 books that year. And
mhm,
I just soaked it all in and I just kept reading. I could not get enough. And so that's what got me started in
mhm,
blogging. And I slowly built my niche, what I wanted to focus on. And I realized that I wanted to call myself the Catholic Pilgrim because as a military spouse, we travel a lot and our family can go on kind of mini pilgrimages wherever we live. And I love
right.
to travel and we're all on a journey towards heaven. And so it just kind of
Mhm.
worked my life.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely beautiful. I myself am a convert, back 1989. But the fact is that I can so identify with wanting to suck down everything.
Gosh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize how thirsty I was. And it was
Mhm,
incredible. I'm like, I wanted to tell everybody, but it's
mhm.
hard. I'm sure, as you know, when you convert, your family that is not Catholic is not as receptive to hearing everything you want to share. And
Yeah.
but
No, it was a difficult transition for me in the sense of with family, with my mom in particular, really had a difficult time with it, and so it was difficult for a while, but then finally kind of came to the language, which was this is what is life giving for me, and her as a mom, it was like when I could express that, then she's like, okay, if this is what's good for you, and is life-giving and is bringing you to Jesus anyway, so we never were in disagreement about Jesus.
right.
And that was where, so now I joke with her about the fact of, because she was Presbyterian and now and then subsequently she has become Methodist. And so I joke and say, "You're getting closer. Just keep coming." So I can identify. So, but you were, as a Catholic pilgrim, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Well, it's interesting because I had originally called myself, when I first started blogging, I had called myself Passionate Purpose because my husband always tells me that I'm very passionate. But that kind
Mm,
of got mistaken as something else online.
yes.
Got taken the wrong way. And so it wasn't really working. And oddly enough, my dad, who is not Catholic, he's Protestant, but when my husband was deployed, I went home to live near my parents and I lived with my dad. And he said to me one day, he's like, Amy, I want you to watch this movie. I think you'll really love it. And it's got a lot of Catholic, undertones. And I was like, oh, what is it? And he's like, it's called The Way. And
Mm,
I was like, okay, I want to watch it. And so it's
mhm,
all about walking the way
right.
and staying and everything. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to do that. And once I watched that movie and I saw them on pilgrimage like that, I was like, I know what my name should be. So that's where I
Mhm,
got the name Catholic Pilgrim.
yeah. Have you had the opportunity to go on the El Camino? Mm.
That is, I told my husband, it's like, when you retire,
Bucket list. Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I
No.
want to do.
No, it's on my bucket list as well.
uh,
And so
yeah.
it's definitely something that is transformative, just to go on pilgrimage back in I want to, so 16, the summer of 16, we went to Europe, and it was pilgrimage. So my husband has a huge affinity for St. Teresa of Avila. So we
Yeah.
went to Avila and spent time there. But then for me, because St. Ignatius was huge, Ignatius of Loyola was huge for me, we went to Montserrat. And I could stay there forever. It's awesome. But then we went over to the other side of the mountains to Lourdes, and then we went to Rome. And so but it was different because it was pilgrimage. This was the focus, this was part of what we were doing, and it was during the year of divine mercy. So we laugh and say we got so many indulgences by walking through holy doors and going to confession, and so we're hoping that if it didn't help us for a shorter time in purgatory, it's helped others. So that's our hope. But what then led you? So you were blogging, and for several years, and then what led you to take the plunge to doing podcasting? Mhm.
Well, my brother is a podcaster as well, and he's pretty successful
Mm,
at it. And we were talking, and he's like, blogging was kind of on its way out, though I still love to write, and I still
mhm,
love to blog. But he was encouraging me to start one. I was like, yeah, I don't know. And when we were living in Turkey last year, um, previously in January of 2020, I had tried to read through Sister Faustina's diary.
mm,
And then, COVID hit, and then we were moving overseas, and I just couldn't find myself getting into it. And
mhm,
then December of 2020, I was just laying on my bed one day, and I had that diary in my hand, and I just felt a very intense push to start a podcast where every day I would read a short reading from her diary, and I would
mhm,
have accountability because I would have a podcast, and I would people showing up, and I
mhm,
would give a short reflection. And I was like,
right.
should I really do this? And
Mhm,
it just felt right. And so
mhm,
I was like, okay, I'll start a podcast, and this is what it will be. And it's kind of hard to jump into a daily podcast as your
right.
first one. Um, but it was such a blessing. Oh my gosh,
Mhm,
I'm still a little grieving over the fact that, I'm done reading it as far as
mhm,
like for the podcast. Other people are doing it, but yeah, it's just it was really awesome. So then I decided I want to keep this going. And so I decided, I'm just going to switch off and on from a male saint or
mhm,
into a female one, and just read their works because they can show us
mhm,
how to grow in holiness. I mean,
mhm,
it's amazing, and they're such exemplar examples. And
mhm. No, they definitely are. I love the name of your current podcast, Journeying with the Saints. But then, of course, for those who want to find your podcast with Saint Faustina, what did you name that?
that one's just A Year with Saint Faustina, and you can
Mhm,
find that pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. Um, and that is still up. The whole year is already available. So if you want to binge listen
mhm,
to St. Faustina's Diary, you're more than welcome to do that.
mhm,
And I am in the process of transitioning it also over to my other podcast, which is the Journeying with the Saints. And
mhm.
so,
Yeah,
but this
kind
year,
of like a Bible in a year that Father
yeah,
Mike.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
I was listening to that one while doing my own, and
oh
so
wow.
I could kind of relate to Father Michael Schmitz. I'm like, I know what you're going through with a yearly podcast, but that was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Mm. No, it definitely is. And you were kind of sharing what a blessing, what a grace it was to make that journey. Um, you know, did you is there one in particular that you can think of that you could share, of the graces, or maybe somebody else shared one with you of their journey through the diary?
Yeah, I I I can't even count how many people have actually written to me, private messaged me and said, I always wanted to make it through the diary, and I just could never seem to do it.
Mm,
And because it
mm,
it is dense, and it's deep. And if you're not a mystic like she is,
mhm,
she was, it's a little difficult to really gather everything that she's saying. And so to just sit down and like, I'm just going to plow through this, you just cannot do it. And I think that's what I was trying to do the first time that I read through it. And I think a lot of people maybe approach it that way. And so, I've had countless people write and say, this podcast helped me, get through the diary. And I've had so many blessings. I see now the mercy of Christ, and that, just touches me. I've had people from Europe that have written and said, I listen with my kids in the car. And, I even had some people who were fallen away Catholics say that they found the podcast and they went to confession for the first time in years. And so I was like, this is all God. I was just the voice that read the diary. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But you were open and courageous enough to respond to the Holy Spirit's promptings. And I think sometimes we forget that that's how God works, is that he'll prompt us and we give our yes. And that's part of why I always speak about say yes, but we give our yes, and then he does the work through us, and it helps transform lives. And we're always, our world is always telling us that, oh, you got to be doing something, you have to have this huge, like, for example, social media following, huge following, or how many people, listen to, are part of your YouTube channel or subscribers to a podcast or whatever. And the fact is that God always will use what we will say yes to do far more wondrous things than we would ever have imagined. I mean, so it's something of, just reminder, especially, to the listeners out there, God is working through you, regardless of whether or not you might not necessarily see it right now, but he's working through you. And so, but what a treasure, to have that now. It's now there. It's like a book. You used a book and you kind of created it, to get people through it. So awesome. Well, wonderful. So who are you focusing on in with your journeying with the saints this year?
So this year is Venerable Fulton Sheen, and obviously not a canonized saint yet, but I'm trusting that that's going to happen.
It will. It will. Yeah.
Yeah, he is just really speaks to me. It was between him and St. Francis de Sales, and I got both of their books, and I sat down with both of them and I looked through both of them, and it was it was hard. But I think because Bishop Sheen is more modern, he's so prophetic that you would think that what he is saying, that he lives right now. I mean, I have to remind myself, oh, he's not here witnessing what we're going through right now, but he's speaking so directly to it. It's incredible. And I just felt like that was really needed in our day and age.
So do you do a similar format then, kind of like what you did with Saint Faustina and her diary with Bishop Fulton Sheen's writings?
Yes. So the book I'm reading is The Way to Inner Peace. And this year is a weekly podcast, not daily. And that podcast drops every Monday. But yeah, so it's a smaller book and there are numbers in it. And so I just read one number each week. And at the end of the year, I've read through the whole thing. So
beautiful. Well, I mean, it's something where I'm doing the Bible in a year this year, and so when I have a chance to do podcasts, I jump on and I listen, and it's absolutely beautiful. So thank you, for your work that you're doing there. You made mention about before about how exemplarily, what models and examples saints are for us. And so, is that the main reason why you think is important for people to be kind of journeying with the saints, or is there another hope that you have for the podcast?
well, obviously growing up, we didn't ever talk about saints. And so it just has opened my eyes to all these fantastic lives of the saints, and they're all different. I mean, they all have unique gifts. They did fantastic things. I mean, if you look at Saint Faustina, she really
Mhm.
was kind of like an obscure nun living in a convent, basically almost cloistered, not completely, who changed the world with her writings. And so that
Mm.
just shows you that, even if you think your life is small or, kind of hidden, like you said earlier, God will work through you to do incredible things. I mean, you wouldn't think that somebody like that could change the entire world. I mean, her writing is over the whole world, and everybody gets to learn about Christ's divine mercy.
Mhm.
And so, I just I've grown so much in my knowledge of the saints, and I think they live out the virtues so well. And we can see, I mean, even reading through St. Faustina's diary, you can see when she struggles, and she talks about that. I think sometimes we think the saints' lives were perfect, without suffering. I mean, they suffer like even more than the rest of us, and they find a way to, use that suffering for God's greater glory. And we need to hear that. We need to hear how their lives are so vastly different, but yet they use their gifts. They just entrust their gifts to God and say, let me bring your message to the world in whatever way, I can. And I just love that.
Uh, and it is a wonderful way for us to really be encouraged,
Yeah.
um, and so that we can persevere when we run into all of those challenges, all those difficulties. And so, speaking of which, what have you found to kind of be the most challenging about trying to share the saints with others? Mhm.
Oh gosh. I don't know actually. um, I think a lot of people view the saints as, you know, a separate class of people. Like
Mm,
they're kind of like God's chosen ones that are kind of set
mhm,
apart, and helping people to realize that we are all created for sainthood.
mhm,
And not to say that in a, prideful way, but in
mhm,
humility. Your life has purpose. You were created for a reason. And so, it's not just meant for, these people in the past. Saints are being created today. And I think even a lot of Catholics forget that it's meant for you too. And that doesn't mean you have to necessarily be on the global stage like a Mother Teresa or, Saint Pope John Paul II or something like that. You can do it in your community, in your home, where you're at. And
mhm,
I think trying to get that message across to people, especially in our social media world
mhm.
where everybody wants to do something big and something amazing in order to be seen and heard, um, trying to get them to understand that you were meant for sainthood too. I think it's a hard thing to get across.
It is. It's hard to wrestle with that reality that, and this is the other part too that in my own journey, and then also with others, is that whole idea that it's not just to become a saint when we die.
Right.
Rather, it's to be living, breathing, wonder working saints here and now. Because when you start, reading the lives of saints, you realize, oh my gosh, there's miracles like all over the place that they were instruments of helping bring about. And it's just amazing when you think about they didn't think of it as, they knew it wasn't them. It was all God.
Right.
But we are to be those kind of instruments too. And for as much as we have quote self-empowerment and self-realization out there, it's amazing how little self-esteem we all have in that we don't claim our identity as sons and daughters of the great high king of God himself. And with that comes all of that power and grace. But um so kind of flipping a little bit, how do you think your work, your journey has been helping you on your journey to be a saint? Mm.
Well, you know, we're called as Christians to be humble, and part of that is recognizing our gifts and then that come from God, and then using those gifts to glorify God. And I think sometimes when we acknowledge our gifts and our talents, people see that as a prideful thing. And
Mhm.
I really had to recognize, it's okay to acknowledge your gifts and talents.
Mhm.
I am I believe a good writer and a good teacher. And
Mhm.
so how can I best use those gifts in order to help others learn about Christ? Those are
Right.
the gifts God gave me. And so how can I use them? And just learning to step out of my comfort zone, write about things that maybe people don't really want to hear. But,
Mhm.
using that to maybe bring truth and light on different matters. And, just that's my biggest thing with everything that I do, from podcasting to writing. And I've done speaking before, is I want to bring truth. I want to shed light on the beauty of Catholicism and how close it brings us to Christ. And, just using those gifts to help other people and realizing that that's not a prideful thing.
Right.
you know, my husband, I believe his gifts are the gifts of leadership, and he's to use those in whatever way he can to bring others to Christ. And so, it's doing this has humbled me a lot because I've had to learn a
Mhm.
lot. Like I said, I had to go, research, read a ton of books. I still do. Um, realizing I don't always have the right answer, which is hard for me.
Yeah,
And,
I can
but
identify.
God keeps me humble in that way. um, but it's been such a joy and a treasure to travel along with all the people that do follow me on my social media platforms,
Mhm.
just to hear their words of advice and their encouragement and see them grow in their faith. And, if I share a church in Turkey that they're like, I had no idea that there was such a beautiful church there. And I got
Mhm.
to go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and to be able to bring that back to people was such a joy. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's such community, and I love it. And it just feeds my soul.
Mhm. Uh, yeah, and I can identify. So of all of your kind of pilgrimaging and your journeying and sharing, um, what's been one idea or habit or practice that has been key for you in living out the life that God created you for?
Morning prayer time.
Okay.
Absolutely
Yeah.
key. Um, I started, uh, gosh, I don't even remember now. It's been years. I started giving up sleep time to get up early in the morning before my kids get up, to just sit and have my prayer time. And I use the Magnificat
Mm-hmm.
as my prayer tool, and
Mm-hmm.
just to read the daily readings and use the prayers that are in there. It always has a part about saints in there, so I can learn about the saints. It always reminds me of what feast day we're celebrating. um, it has been absolutely instrumental. Like, if I lose my Magnificat or it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't come in time, I'm panicked. I don't even like the online version. I know it's there, but I don't want that because I just love holding it in my hands, and just having that prayer time. And some days I don't get a full 30 minutes or whatever, but um, I need that to ground me, to connect my day to God, to offer it to Him, and just to be close to Him. I just need that. And if I don't get it, I can feel it.
Oh yeah, no, and it's part of why I mean, church is taught from the very beginning, you know, daily prayer, daily prayer and meditation, and so I talk about that as that's step one. You know, you're wondering how can you get closer to Jesus? That's step one, that daily prayer and meditation, and then He will show you, you know, and the sacraments, of course, you know, give us His graces and His presence, and you know, so I say that's step two. But
Yeah.
step one is that relationship with Him, that friendship, and that intimacy, and then and the reason I say, you know, sacraments are step two is because the graces of the sacraments really only can come full force when we have that relationship with him already there, and then we can receive them. So, but I'm so glad that you have that, and it's such a joy to be able to start your day. And I joke and I say I put on my Jesus glasses, because my glasses are really bad when I look around at the world, and people, and I judge people, and I get upset, and especially as a mom, there's so much that you can't control.
Yeah.
So wonderful. So a little bit, I can't believe that our time is already ending for us, but a little bit of fun. You talked about all of the different books that you've read, but I'll let you broaden your category. But what's your favorite book, movie, or TV show?
My all-time favorite book is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, I,
That
I'll,
is also my favorite movie.
well, I mean, you're close enough, and it would be a little bit of a trip, but I had the absolute privilege. I took my mom, and our youngest son. We went up to New York back in December, and we saw To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway.
Yeah.
And so Greg Kinnear actually is taken over in the role of Atticus Finch, but we saw it with Jeff Daniels.
Okay.
But the people who are playing Scout and Jem are just phenomenal. But I highly, it's well worth the pilgrimage up to New York, to have that, especially if that's your favorite book. But I so loved it as well. So I actually shared this with you before we started, but is there a particular actress that you would like to play you in the movie about your life, which is going to be a saint movie, kind of like Song of Bernadette, so who's going to play Amy Thomas in the movie?
Well, I am so bad. I'm not even up to date on who the actresses are today because
Yeah.
I don't watch TV anymore hardly at all.
Hmm.
I just find so little of it uh, helpful to my life, I guess is what.
Hmm.
So if I actually had to pick, I
Hmm.
would. And she's no longer living,
That's okay. Hmm.
but I either Grace Kelly or Audrey Hepburn. Those classic.
Oh,
I
wow. Wow. You said both of those, and I immediately knew who it was that I'd pick for my life, and it'd be Barbara Stanwyck. So yeah, the classic actresses, that's beautiful. So one final thing, and this is kind of it helps us all as well. So if you could go back in time and share one piece of advice with your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Well, at 18 years old, I had turned my back on God at that period of my life.
Mhm.
Um, at 17, I'd had a very tragic incident happen in my life, and I thought God had abandoned me. And
Mhm.
so, since I thought He abandoned me, I was going to abandon Him. I still believed in God, but I did not want anything to do with Him. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to really pray. I was just going to live life my own way and deal with things my own way.
Mhm.
But that 18-year-old me was unhappy, so
Mhm.
unhappy and bitter and trying to find happiness in all the wrong places. And I would
Mhm.
just tell her, He never abandoned you. And He was right there with you.
Mhm.
And you cannot see it right now, but He will take this tragedy and turn it into something beautiful that you can't see, but just trust that it will be beautiful. And He
Mhm.
did.
And
Yeah.
and how beautiful that message is so rooted in the journey that you took with Saint Faustina. Jesus, I trust in you, and to trust. So
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for your time.
Oh,
I've so enjoyed our conversation, and I know that everyone out there has as well. And so as we're ending, let people know where it is that, the names of your podcast and where they might be able to find out more about you.
yes. So my website is www.catholicpilgrim.net. And if you go on there, you can subscribe and you'll get my podcast whenever it drops. But you can look wherever you listen to podcasts for Journeying with the Saints. Season 2 is with Venerable Fulton Sheen, and season 1 is with Saint Faustina. in her diary. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Catholic Pilgrim, not a Twitter user. Yeah, just can't get down with that, but that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure that you're going to be picking up a few more subscribers, and especially for the podcast. And I look forward to being able to journey with you again in the future. For everyone out there, thanks so much for joining us today. And know of my continued prayers that you are able to continue to do whatever it takes so that together we can tell the Master of Death, not today. God bless.